The best way to teach a language. Hello guys, so it's a little quiet because I'm still not really back from where I was. So yeah, I did post a video yesterday. It was scheduled, okay. I kind of forgot about it, but anyways, today's video is on the best way to teach a language. Now obviously, why am I making this video? Do I teach any languages? No. But I've just noticed that there are certain things you can do to help somebody who is learning a language, especially if you're the person who's teaching them, okay? So the one thing you shouldn't be doing is making them memorize anything except things that basically need to be memorized. For example, numbers and months and weekdays, stuff like that. All you have to do is say what it is, and then all they need to do to get good at it is to practice with it. Numbers is like the best example, right? So instead of saying 30, I'll now say sanju. I learned sanju like the organic way or whatever, but knowing it immediately is something that comes from practicing. If you're going to be doing numbers and weekdays and stuff like that, knowing it in multiple languages can get tricky. So I would advise that you just stick with the one that you prefer the most, okay? Like, I know the numbers in Japanese now, but I don't often switch between that and French or Spanish because it's just way too much on the brain, okay? Switching languages in general is already hard, but with numbers especially, it's very difficult. So don't try and do that to yourself. But if you're somebody who's teaching that, all you have to do is make sure you speak with the numbers constantly, but also very slowly so that the person has time to process what you're trying to say with them, okay? And just teach them how the number system works. Like with Japanese, niju, sanju, it's just X times 10 to get to the 20s, 30s, 40s. You know what I mean, right? Like, you didn't have to learn each individual number to know that. Stuff like that can also just make it easier instead of straight up memorization. Now, when it comes to speaking the language, the best way to help somebody with it is, from my experience, right? The person who will help you is the person who they're always speaking in that tongue, and they speak slow enough for you to understand. They don't judge you if you mess up. They're gonna correct you in the language, not correct you with the language that you already know. Meaning that if you mess up, right, they're just gonna say the correct way of saying it, but they're not gonna outright tell you that because, again, we don't want to do too much memorization when we're talking about languages. Numbers is memorization. It's just straightforward and easy, right? But with how the language is spoken, if you try and make that a memory thing, now it's no longer going to be organic, and it's going to even be more difficult because every time you want to say something, you have to remember what the word means rather than just going straight away to the word and having that organic connection with the word, right? Also, if you're helping someone to learn a language, speak slowly. That helps a lot. I've noticed that with me in Japanese, I've needed to slow down the video so that I can make sure that I'm hearing correctly the words that are being said, and that helps me a lot to get new ones as well. I know people say immersion is good, but throwing a bunch of new words at people is actually very confusing, even if you're trying to immerse them. The best way to do it is try and stick to words that they're familiar with so that when you introduce a new word to them, it's easier for them to learn. So basically, you want majority to be similar words, and then little by little, you'll introduce new words to them. I talked about this before. 1, 2, 3 words a day is actually pretty good. Doing 5 words a day, a lot of words a day, is bad because, especially if it's not your native language that you're trying to learn, it's just gonna be too much for you to memorize in the day. And you might think that, 1 word is nothing. It's a lot, especially if that's not the only language you want to know. And the reason why I'm saying you want to introduce words little by little is because if you introduce a bunch of new words at the same time, the person won't even know what you're trying to say. But if you introduce one word at a time, because they know the rest of those words, they can kind of guess the meaning of the new word you're showing them. It's not that you don't want the person to learn, it's that they need to learn slowly in order to truly get it, right? And just because somebody learns a word doesn't mean they know the full meaning of it. So you need to make sure you're repeating the word continually so that they can completely understand. In pretty much any language, right? A lot of words have multiple meanings. So if you only use the word with them a few times, they're only going to understand the meaning of that word a few times. They're not going to truly grasp and make sure that that word only has one meaning or multiple meanings or whatever, right? So don't just be like, oh, they know it and just forget about the word. No, continually use it, right? That's how you help make sure that they're sticking with it. And also, even if you have heard the word before, sometimes people will forget the meaning. That's the importance of helping them speak it, but that's also the importance of constantly repeating it, right? So make sure you're always being repetitive, and make sure like you say things in multiple ways as well. Don't repeat the same type of sentences over and over and over again, because you're not helping the person to be dynamic with how they speak the language or how they learn it. They're only going to understand one way of saying things instead of understanding multiple ways. So for example, in Chi, right, there's like this saying "minpe hao," right? You can say "how de minpe," and then I think there's another way of saying, but the point is that like you don't just say it in one way, right? And "minpe hao" means like I don't want trouble, right? So if I just learned the one way, right, I would be very confused with the other way. Technically, I would be able to figure out the other way because it's all the same words, but you see what I mean, right? So you want to make sure you're being dynamic and make sure you introduce the person who you're teaching to a lot of things, not just the one thing that you think they have to know or whatever, right? The way you speak the language is more important and more authentic than the quote-unquote correct way of saying things in the language. So don't focus on being grammatically correct, even if you're the person teaching the person. Focus on like being authentic in how you would say it, because sometimes there are ways of saying things in the language that maybe you're not taught in school, but it's organic because it's coming from a native speaker. So if you want your person to be natural with the language, then speak in a native kind of way. And again, don't be correcting them all the time unless you correct them with the language, and make sure you tell them that they're doing a good job, but don't butter them up too much, because being buttered up is going to mess up your concept of how you know the language, right? You're going to think you're so good when you're barely there, and that's just not good. There's a reason why it takes babies like 2 years to speak, right? Or 3 years or whatever, however many. You really think they're going to learn the whole dictionary in those 2 years? No, they're probably doing one or a few words a day, because they have to take the time to familiarize themselves with the language before they can really start speaking it well, okay? With language learning specifically, it's always best if there's one person who knows the language well and another person who doesn't know it that well, or is learning under the person. But the point is, one has to know the language up to almost native level or fluent level, right? To be able to teach. You can't just be like, oh, I know like some words in the language, and then you're trying to teach somebody. It just doesn't work. Unless again it's something like numbers that's straight memorization, it does not work out well, because you could be confusing the person and stuff like that. So make sure you know your level of expertise before you start trying to teach people, okay? If you're not good, don't try and teach. You're just going to confuse people more, right? If you're going to teach the person, teach only with the language you want to target them with, okay? Unless for something that basically requires memorization. Make sure if you teach the language, you teach the culture as well, okay? Because that sometimes helps with grasping the language. You won't believe it, okay? A good example, I guess, with Chi, right, is kokoko, like going and knocking for marriage. Literally, the kokoko part is just the sound of the knocking, right? But if you know the culture behind it, then it changes the meaning entirely. So please understand that culture and language go hand in hand. Another really cool thing that my cousin was talking about was that I guess if you're a parent, that you will teach your children, you will speak the language that you want them to learn in home, and when you're outside, you'll speak it less when you're outside, to kind of show that, hey, this is your home language and this is your outside language. And the benefit of doing it this way is that it kind of helps the child separate the two languages so that they don't end up being too confused. For example, if your native language is not English and you're living in America or something like that, and you still want your children to learn your native language, you'll speak your native language inside the home with them, but when they go outside, you speak English. And that kind of helps the child not be confused as well, for their own sake, especially when they're growing up, because teaching a language while the child's growing up, especially when they're really little and stuff, is the best way to get it ingrained in them early on. It's not that you can't do it later on, but it's that language learning gets harder as you age, so it's best to start from early, from young. Okay, honestly, I think that's it for this video, and I hope I can make cake footage to go along with this video. Bye!